Okay, great. And we are live. So if you're not speaking, I would ask you to please mute yourself so that we're not so that the sound doesn't interrupt from the person that's speaking. Thank you all for joining us for the book review of The Power of Vulnerability. I have loved this book so much. I have enjoyed every minute of it. And for the past 3 weeks, I have been completely devoted to reading and knowing everything about Brene Brown and who she is, where she comes from, who has interviewed her, what books has she written, just because of the impact that this book has made in my life. So I am actually really excited that I have Melanie Fachuesi joining us tonight, and she's going to be she is actually a motivational speaker, and she fits right in to talk to us about the book because her passion is to help people succeed in life. She lets us know that success is defined by the individual, whether business, personal growth, relationships, or so on. And she likes to help facilitate growth. And that's what we're doing here with this book. So it wasn't like a technical book that teaches us about Bitcoin or, how to manage a business or how to do numbers, but the personal growth that happens after reading this book, as those of you that have read it, I'm positive that it has left an impact on you. So, Melanie, tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right. Well, thank you. So, just a little bit about me. I won't talk too long because I'm like, we're going to do this whole book in an hour. So, um, I'm from Michigan. I was born and raised in Flint, home of General Motors. When I graduated from high school, I joined the military, lived around the world, traveled around the world with the military, worked as a government contractor. Then I was doing sessions for the Dale Carnegie franchise. Dale Carnegie wrote the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And that really started my professional development journey. And it's just been so amazing when you start getting that self awareness and you really, really start to know yourself. And so currently, I am working at a hospital in Las Cruces as a nurse recruiter, and I still have coaching clients and I still do speaking engagements. But like Michelle said, what drives me is helping people get from where they are to where they want to be. And so much is possible in our lives. It's just realizing so much of what Brene says, just that we're kind of all doing the same thing and we're kind of judging ourselves really hard. And I love when she says, would you say that to your best friend? And if you wouldn't say it to your best friend, don't say it to yourself. And there's another speaker, and I can't remember who it was. It was either Zig Ziglar or Jim Rohn, but he said, when you're in your own mind, you're behind enemy lines, meaning that you're unusually cruel and unforgiving to yourself than you are with anyone else. And so when you can really embrace that and change your self-talk, you can really start to change your life. So Brene, if I don't know that everyone's read the book or known about Brene. I have consumed everything she's ever written. She talks about Darren Greatly when she wrote The Power of Vulnerability. She was finishing up Darren Greatly. I highly recommend it. Um, that book is about leadership, entrepreneurship. It's about stepping out into the world and exposing yourself and then being able to take the criticism, because who gets beat up, scarred, and marred? It's the person in the arena, the person trying to better themselves, the person creating a business. Then, there's all this judgment around it. And so that is another great book. So she's a social worker. I love that she shares all the stories about her husband, Steve. I want to read a book by him. That's what I really want. I want to hear what Steve has to say. Her TED Talks are incredible. And then her two poor kids are also the subject matter, right? And at the time of this particular book, she was living in Houston. I'm not sure that she still lives in Houston, but I can't remember 100%. But I think everybody has their favorite story from this. And I will tell you that my favorite story from this is when she's talking to her daughter about the incident in the lunchroom, and she's talking about her marble jar friends. And, sometimes we let people in too fast. And that's when we're betrayed and our trust is breached. And she talks about letting them put the marbles in the jar slowly. And I'm very fortunate tonight that Lorena Lowe is on this call too. She is definitely one of my deepest marble jar friends. She knows where the bodies are buried, and I trust her with all my secrets. So, my wish for all of you is that you have people in your life that are your marble jar friends, and that you're marble jar friends to other people, and that you have people that you can be vulnerable with. And, you know, like Brene, I always hope to be a wholehearted person. And like Brene, I am kind of like, give me the facts, only the facts. Let's move forward. Come on, let's go, let's go, let's go. As she talks about it just being like, you start having this realization at midlife, right? You start realizing like, this is legit. This is the real thing. What have I been doing with my life? Okay, it's time to kind of get my crap together and decide who I'm going to be. And so, really, I'm honored that Michelle and Lorena reached out to me to help facilitate this conversation. And that's what this is. Not just one person talking, but we learn when we share with each other. And what better space than in the power of vulnerability? None of us know it all. We don't see it the same way. And we learn so much from each other. So, Michelle, I kind of want to ask you, like, what were your feelings in chapter 1 when she's talking about wholeheartedness, and what were like some of your major takeaways?
So I felt that I fit right into everything, just like her. Where she kind of realized that she did hide vulnerability. So it talks about the culture of scarcity and not feeling enough, not feeling relevant enough, not being extraordinary enough, especially like in these days of social media. I feel like that definitely stops me from sometimes putting myself out there, like as a business owner. So I resonated a lot with that. Like that knocked me off my feet just right off the bat. Like chapter 1, I'm like, oh my God, this is gonna, I felt like that's what this discussion is gonna be. And it sure was. Like there was so many times when I read the book that I almost like teared up and choked up from learning so much about myself.
Right. And I will tell you, I've cried many times with or because of Brene, but that's like part of self discovery, is really like stepping into that space. And when, and I wish I don't have a full screen where I could see everybody, but I love how she asks everybody about if they're parents or not. So I'm a parent. I think most of you are parents. I don't know. But when she talks about you can't love anyone more than you can love yourself, how many of you just wanted to argue with her? Right? Yes, I can. Because you know what? I didn't really know what love was until my son was born. And let me tell you, there are times that I hate myself, but I never hate my son. But then you like really listen to what she has to say, and it makes so much sense. And just really going on that journey of self-discovery and like, what is my value? What do I bring to the world? Why am I relevant? Why am I important? And having those people in your life that truly can empathize with you. And it's so incredible and so powerful, because then for me personally, it shifted to a space where I could start listening to other people and starting to see the world from their point of view, and realize that, you know what, we're not all the same. We're just not. And it's okay. And it's okay to be with other people when they're in pain, and it's okay to be vulnerable because it's hard. Like Michelle being a public speaker, you always think you have to be perfect. Your hair has to be perfect. Your weight has to be perfect. Your outfit has to be perfect, all of that. But really, when we're relatable is when we're like, you know what? And Lorena tells this story. So if you know Lorena, she will be more than happy to tell you the story. But when I went through my divorce, I didn't want to get out of bed. I was the motivational speaker for a networking group. And all the way to the networking group, guess what? Lorena had to motivate the motivational speaker. And she tells a story and she just laughs, but it was true. It was true. No one is exempt from life. And like Michelle was sharing, social media makes us feel so inferior. But you know what? Everyone's having a human experience. And I just think Brene has the gift to lay it out so that we can be vulnerable, so that we can heal. I heard this saying once that hurting people hurt people. And so whenever I feel that anger bubbling up and I just really want to let someone have it, I go, why am I hurting? But a lot of that's from Brene.
Yes, so in this chapter, I one of the things that I really like is she points out the elements of of scarcity bound cultures. And so a lot of the times it's not like just us treating our kids, but sometimes even understanding that we were treated like this by our own
Right.
parents. So sometimes it's not what we've done, it's what's been done to us or what's been done to my friend, and this is why she acts this way. So it says that we use shame, um like we use like as like insults, we use bullying, we use comparison, and disengagement with other people, like to control like an outcome, right? And we don't realize this, like, so it says that part, like you have to understand that part, that everybody needs to feel love and belonging. Like they, like she did a test and she was like, who would leave here and never want to experience love again, right? And
Right.
so she said nobody said that. And so nobody raised their hands, right? Like nobody would want to walk out of that room and never like experience love again. And so she teaches you, okay, but we can only love others as much as we love ourselves. And so there's that evidence. And she talks about her daughter's lunch story. And so some of you might relate to this in like from your childhoods, but she talks about her daughter goes to her because she says that nobody sat with her in the lunchroom. And so she says sometimes like we ourselves, like as parents, some parent, like I know somebody has to know somebody this way, that we're like, well, I told you to pull your hair back, or I told you to wear this clothes. And so we blame. And so that's shame. Like we shame them because we make them feel like they were not enough. Like they didn't try enough. They didn't dress up enough. Like they didn't act the way that was expected of them. And so that's where, like, that's how the book opens up. So, I mean, does anybody here have any story that can relate to this, or any experience that can relate to this? Like, if anybody had, raise your hand if anybody had a parent that shamed them at some point in their life. Like,
Throw it up.
you
Oh
did
yeah.
that?
Oh yeah. It's being grown. When I grew up, my dad, first of all, being vulnerable is weak. So if you're vulnerable, you're weak. So I learned that from my dad, being raised with 5 boys, while 6 of us, and then going to the army as well. So vulnerability, being vulnerable, is weakness. So you never let yourself be vulnerable. So in this book, and when she's trying to show us that being vulnerable is strength. When you're vulnerable, when you're open, when you can do that, you can be a strong person. So a lot of people that know me today, that knew me yesterday, they don't recognize me because I'm not that hard person that I used to be, because I was not going to be vulnerable, and I was not going to, because I saw that as weak and giving myself into people. So now, since I've changed how that, I see the light, see the truth. So it's totally different. So now I'm totally vulnerable, and it's a beautiful life.
Yes, so she talks about some of the barriers that come from feeling vulnerability, right? So she talks, some of these barriers are like shame, judgment, for the fear of fitting in. And she tries to convince us, like, or she's trying to tell us that people need to believe that we are worthy of love and belonging. So it is important for us to feel that way, and realizing that everybody has trauma, like everybody has something that has hurt us in the past, that has impacted us, that has made us like want to put on a shield. And in this chapter, like she starts, when this section, she starts to introduce that, so the wholehearted people, they have traumas. Like people who experience joy and who are wholehearted, like they have trauma. Like it's not like nobody has experienced this. So they say like happy people, they just believe that they're worthy of love and belonging and being and practicing certain things, right? And so it's no different from any of us. So we are all capable of feeling like we are deserving of love and belonging, and all of us are worthy of like happiness, right? Melanie, what's your take on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And worthiness is such a powerful word. And you know, somewhere in the history of time and evolution and just stories that have been told to people and in different content is I like how she says, like, don't puff up. Because I mean, how many of us could think back of our parents, like shaming us if we were proud? But then it also weeds out your sense of worthiness. You know, like if you don't make the team, if you don't have the right support system at home, then it crushes you. Like we're all worthy of love. And when you think about how some people get so broken and so shattered, and then just the other like decisions that are made because they don't understand that they are worthy, and that self-respect. And it's just important. And I think that segues perfectly, Michelle, into the next thing that she starts talking about is the armor that we put on. And so, Nate, I truly appreciate your story. I mean, being from Flint, Michigan, you're either hard or you're walked on. And, people always say it's so hard to get to know me, but then once they get to know me, they're like, you're such the nicest person. You're so giving. But it's like, we keep that armor on because I don't want to be taken advantage of. If you see my weakness, you will exploit it and you will use it against me. Right. And then she later in the book, she talks about how I take off this armor, but then I put on this other armor. And how often do we do that in our relationships, our close, intimate, like deep soul sister? This is my mate for life. And we don't necessarily have the same armor as that we have on, to the outside world, but we have on a different armor because you know what? If they really knew me, if they knew who I really was, the imposter syndrome, right, they would not love me because I'm not worthy. And Brene just really, for me, like Nate, helped me break through that barrier and be like, you know what? I am worthy. And you know what makes me worthy are all my flaws and all my imperfections. And I love when she's talking about being at the failure conference. And she's like, these people failed big. And it's like, that's right. Nothing great in your life comes without failure. So it's like, sometimes I'm like totally living in this Brene space where it's like, yeah, I get it. I'm this person, this person. And then something happens and I put that armor on. And what do we call it? We call it masks more in this society, but it's the same thing, right? And I have to get my external battery. My battery's dying. But she is just so masterful how she simplistically explains to us on a way that we can understand exactly what she's talking about. Like we all relate to it in our own lives. So does anyone have a story about a certain situation that they found themselves in where they just kind of packed on the armor? And can you see everyone, Michelle? Because I can only see like 3 people.
Yes, I can see. So she does in this book. So okay, so I guess we're still breaking barriers here, but I'll tell you what. So here she says, we wholehearted people embrace vulnerability. And we fear vulnerability because we tie it into it being like a dark emotion. It's the core of fear, shame, uncertainty, is the birthplace also of every positive emotion. So instead of when we armor up to like avoid it, we shield all of our emotions. So we shield also like happy, joyful, and pathetic. So she says, so wholehearted people, like they embrace vulnerability. And when we're not doing it and when we're blocking certain, like we're like, okay, well, I don't want to feel fear, so I'm going to protect myself against fear all the time. But then you block happiness because then you're wearing that armor all the time, like you don't take it off. And what she says about armor is that it gets heavy, like it starts being it's hard to keep it on, and it's tiring, and then we get tired of being um tired, and we disengage to protect ourselves.
Michelle, she tells a great story, which is my favorite in that chapter, where she's having a wonderful date night with her husband and they're trying to hide from the kids getting home because they're just finishing date night and they're barely going to sleep. They can see that the lights are out and they're outside. And she's hearing the Little River Band. It's 1970 music. It's the perfect night. She's kissing him, and all of a sudden she turns around and thinks, what if gunmen jump out of the hedge and shoot us? And the husband, Steve, is like, what? That's one of my favorites. I'm sorry, I had to share that. I thought that was funny because she's creating this horrible moment, thinking of the worst possible thing that could happen, creating what we
Letting
call
it steal her joy.
exactly the joy killer.
Yeah.
She talks about this being it goes deeper into this story on chapter 4, but it talks about this particular story. It does say how media protects, like it makes us become that way, right? So it says sometimes like we're watching what are the, I don't watch TV, but tell me which ones are the shows
Law
about
and Order.
Law and
Law and
Order.
Order, CSI, the news. Like I haven't had cable in forever, and I don't watch the news because it's like it's we actually live in one of the best times to be alive, and they catastrophize everything. Everything is doom and gloom, and like, can you believe this? Can you believe this? Can you believe this? And it's like, I can't live there. I don't want to be sad. I want to have joy. And so I shared this with someone the other day, and it was like a man at work. So Nate, if you're going to laugh at me, I don't know how I feel about that, but the Bible song that you sung in Sunday school, be careful little eyes, what you hear, be careful little eyes, what you see, because when you take all that in, it becomes part of who you are. And that's why I choose for me to not watch it, because I'm so susceptible. And I think a lot of it has to do with my time in the military, but I don't want to see people getting hurt. I don't want to see crime and violence, especially against women. My mom was abused when I lived at home by my stepdad. And so when I see stuff like that, I take it so deep in my soul that I'm crushed. I feel that pain all over again. And so just really evaluate, what are you listening to? Who are your friends? Who are your friends is so important, and I love her stories about her friends, and I try and be that friend, and I'm blessed to have friends like that. And what are you watching on TV, and what movies are you selecting, and what books are you reading? And it's like, I don't know if you guys ever heard of Malcolm Gladwell, but he talks about just noticeable difference. And he talks about, like, if you have the music and you turn it up really loud, like everyone's like, whoa, 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 what happened? But if a bunch of people are talking and you just turn it just a little bit, the dial, that everyone will change the volume to go over the music, but no one notices it. And so whenever I'm trying to change a behavior for myself, that's what I think of. I'm not going to just like crank it. I'm going to just do a little bit at a time. And so really, for each of you, just kind of think of something that you do that really isn't serving your core joy, your happiness, and consider maybe cutting down on it a little bit to just see if it works. And, I don't miss the news. I figure if there's really something I need to know, someone will tell me it throughout the day.
I agree, because it does gives us a lot of anxiety. So at the end of this chapter of this section, it's not chapters, guys, and it's not actually a book. But so she talks about what she's going to go into in the next sessions, right? Because there's a total of 6. So she talks about we're going to talk about what gets in the way and the struggle. We're going to talk like shame triggers, what drives our fears, vulnerability myths, and she does a guidepost for like wholehearted living. So she teaches us like what's shame, like how to better adapt to vulnerability, and then she actually tells us like how to live the wholehearted way. Like these are some of the things that in her research that she realized. So she spent this was a really long time, guys, and she did this research with other doctoral students of where they were all putting research together, and she spent years doing this and learning this. because she goes over with people, and she actually even had to get a therapist during the course of doing this research, because she couldn't admit that, like, she thought like wholehearted is just like, I like, she thought she was wholehearted, she just didn't know it, right? And so she can't accept that, that she's not vulnerable, and that she's like a perfectionist, and that she fits right into everything that we're actually going to talk about. And so she herself had to get a therapist. She was her therapist's last client. And then she goes in and she tells the therapist, like, okay, look, I have 6 months. I have a problem with vulnerability. I don't want to talk about my childhood. I don't want to talk about trauma. I don't want to talk about this. I just need like tips. I just give me a list of things to follow and I'll do it. Because obviously, this is like how perfectionists work, right? Like, we just try to make the best of it. And so that was a really funny story in the book for those of you that listened, because when she's talking about getting like a therapist, like, she even has a hard time because some of her friends are like, oh my God, I wouldn't want to be your therapist. And then she jumps into shame triggers. And so she talks about when we feel shame, like, sometimes we suppress it because we think if I don't talk about it, like, it's not happening, right? And so we put on this armor of like, no, I don't feel shame and I'm not going to talk about it. But she refers to shame as like gremlins. And so the reason why is because shame, if you leave it in the dark, and obviously in water, like, it multiplies, right? But when you bring it to light and when you talk about it and when you're open about it, like, that's how the gremlins were dying. And so that's what she refers to shame. So whatever she feels shame for, like, she'll call her friends and she'll be like, okay, I can't like write this paper, it's due in so long and I can't write it. And so then her friends will ask her, okay, like, what are the gremlins? Like, what do we need to get out of the way? Like, what's causing us shame? Like, usually the shame came from like, for us, is like a feeling not enough.
Right. It's or I'm not good enough, or I'm not as good as her. And the imposter syndrome, right? If I write this, they're going to figure it out that I'm not as great as they think I am. And she also compares the gremlins like to the Dementors on Harry Potter. They just suck all the joy out of your life. And when you have like that huge, huge, huge self doubt, how hard is it to move yourself forward? And I can remember like the first time I was being recorded speaking, I was like, oh my God, this is horrible, right? And you just kind of have to get over that. And the shame that leads to like all the addictions, to addiction to food, addiction to drugs, addiction to alcohol, addiction to sex. And all of us have been there in some form of the spectrum. But when you can recognize it and self identify it, then you can start fighting your dementors and your gremlins, and when you expose them. And she talks about how when you bring them out into the light, they lose their power just by saying it. So, a big thing that I believe is a lot of times you don't need to fix anything, people just need to be heard. People just want to be able to talk about it. And when you have that safe space to go, oh my God, to your best friend, right? And I'm going to pick on Lorena because I know her the best and I love her and I'm not shaming her. But sometimes she has a hard time making phone calls for her business. And so what I love about us, her and I, is that she could be honest and be vulnerable with me. And then I could just go, okay, so what happens when you make phone calls? Well, really good stuff happens. So it's all these stories that we make up in our head. But if you can talk about it, if you can pull it into the light, then it loses its power. It loses its power over you. It loses its power for destruction in your life, and it loses its power to suck the joy out of your life. Does anybody, and you can just unmute yourself because I can't see everyone like Michelle can, and just introduce yourself. But does anyone have a story about maybe a gremlin that they had that they drug out into the light and how they overcame it?
So while I wait for one of you to go ahead and chime in, I'm just going to talk while one of you decides to unmute yourselves. But
Just
so
do it.
she says everybody, the only people who don't experience shame are psychopaths. So you gotta experience shame. Like we all experience shame, and the more that you try to hide it, like the more that it cultivates. So it's like, oh, okay, like this brings me shame, but you don't want to bring it to light. It just gets bigger. That armor gets heavier and heavier and heavier until you can't bear it anymore. And so this is what, how she said, it leads to addiction. And perfectionism is actually an addiction. And so I had to learn with that, like so many things. I mean, I was that mom, how she talks about like the cookie story. I was that mom, like always trying to do the most, right? And so that's what she was like. She just never, like, she was always like a perfectionist, you know, and that leads to, like she said, addictions and shame. So it makes us feel shameful when we can't do this, right? So this ties in, like, let's say if we're linking it to like an eating disorder. Let's say your addiction is an eating disorder, and so she says that shame is highly correlated with addiction, depression, bullying, violence, eating disorders, guilt, and more guilt. And shame and addiction are also like, it's the same thing. Like you cannot have shame. Like shame leads into addiction, and what you use for addiction, it depends on you. I can tell you that probably after my divorce, I developed an addiction. I know people say you can't be addicted to marijuana, but I really was, because it was hiding. What I was using it for was like to suppress my feelings. So anytime I felt anxiety or anytime I felt sad, like, you know, I would just go outside and it would mellow me out and it would control my emotions. But I wasn't talking about how I was ashamed to be a single mom again, how I was ashamed to be left in, you know, the situation that I was left in, and I was suppressing it, and that armor was getting heavier and heavier and heavier. I lost like, I think I lost a total of like 25 pounds in less than 2 months. So it was something that was carrying a burden, and I wasn't wanting to talk about it. So it left me there in that position where, you know, I was carrying one addiction to another. So then when I stopped smoking marijuana, and it says sometimes, like, so sometimes we want to take control over addiction, but if we're not addressing the problem and we're not addressing like what's actually causing this shame, like you're just going to go from one addiction to another. So I went from, okay, I'm not going to smoke as much marijuana anymore, but now I'm going to work day and night. And so I was working to exhaust, like until I got exhausted. Like there was no more that I could possibly give. And work is also an addiction. And it's a glorified addiction at that, in these days. And so it's not a good thing, guys. So until we address like what's causing us shame or what we can overcome, like we're not going to be able to fix it.
Right. And I'm like you, Michelle. Like I struggle with that addictive personality because, okay, I can't control this part of my life, but I can control this. And I used to run marathons, but why did I run marathons? Because I was miserable. But you know, what you say is like in our culture, how glorified it is. And she talks about how she's like learning about the I don't know, the new generation, or the lazy people that all they do is relax. And she's like, what is this? And I experienced this recently
She
at
called
work.
it
Like,
fooling around.
yeah, fooling around. I experienced this, like I'm working so hard, I'm working so hard. Next thing I know, I can't walk. My back gives out. I have to go to the doctor. And then before you know it, like not because I wanted to take 2 weeks off, because I physically had to take 2 weeks off, like on my ass. And but you know, it's like you get that gold star when you work that hard. But what are you hiding from? And why aren't, and I will tell you, those 2 weeks were so much fun. And it was truly just mental exhaustion. And I flew out and saw my son and got to do like all this stuff that like I really wanted to do. And I cannot believe how much better I felt coming back to work. But I had what, guilt and shame because I can't do enough. I can never get it done. But also it's like, what are you hiding from? What are you not facing that if you just faced it, that really it could lose its power over you? And I think that it really does take like to your 40s and 50s before you have that maturity to recognize it and are able to like kind of deal with it.
Yeah, so it says, so it talks here about how, so and it talks about shame and addiction, and then later on in the book we're gonna get to like the wholesome parts and how to cultivate joy and happiness and all that. But here at the beginning, it's talking about how do we do this, right? So it says an addict needs shame, like I'm sorry. So I'm sorry, an addict does not need shame. And so sometimes like we tend to shame people and we forget like what it is. And so it tells you, so what's the difference between shame and guilt is shame makes somebody feel like they're a mistake, whereas to guilt makes them feel bad for something that they did. So when we call somebody like lazy, like those are like really big like shame triggers. And so, or when we call somebody fat, like those are really shame triggers. And so it tells you like that as a parent, we need to start like cultivating the thinking that guilt is good because it's adaptive, but shame is actually like the opposite of that. And so it's like we are we sometimes we are like letting go of like that shame also by like blaming. And so in this we blame stuff, right? And so Brene Brown in this chapter in this section talks about how she was a blamer, like she was an avid blamer. So she goes off into like these stories of how she would blame something, and she talks about a story, and I would actually like to get an answer from everybody here on the chat. And so it gives so let's say you are at a dinner party and you're drinking red wine and there's white carpet and you spill some wine, and right, and so how many of you would leave because nobody saw you? Right? And so that's your first option. Like you drop some red wine on this red carpet at this party you're attending. Do you leave because nobody saw you? Do you find the hostess to help you clean this up? Or do you say like, well, who serves like red wine when you have a white carpet, right? And so she gives like these examples and she tells you like, okay, so that would be I'm staying and cleaning up my mess. Good for you. I would have blamed. I am a blamer. So like I said, this book made me reflect on so much. It's true. Like I was a blamer. And so it says that blame is actually, there's a quick definition to this, is the discharging of pain and discomfort. So at the time that you're doing it, or at the time that somebody's blaming you, we need to find the compassion, because at that moment when they're blaming, they are releasing, that's their way of releasing pain and discomfort. And that's our way of understanding that we are releasing pain and discomfort. So it teaches you like, if you're a blamer, this is what you're doing. Like that's how you adapt to shame.
What if you want to clean it up, but you're also asking who serves red wine on a white carpet?
We are blamers.
Yeah, well, because she talks about that. She says it's not actually what you do, it's the first thought that enters your mind. Because she says that she would go and offer to pay for it or to clean it, but the first things that she thinks is, why would you have white carpet? So it's really just that first thought, that glimpse that happens at the very beginning. And I'm like that too. I would be like, this is ridiculous. Like, why would you have white carpet? And why, if you do, why would you serve? But I would probably try and clean it up and offer to pay for it. But my first thought is, it's their fault. Who does this stupid stuff?
Who has white carpet, first of all?
I think you go through all three. I think you spill, you first look up and think, did anybody see that? And then you sit there and say, oh, well, I should clean it up. And then as you're cleaning it up, well, who has white carpet?
But it's kind of the same thing in other interactions too, because you're like, well, why did you do that? Or why did you want to come from like a helpful place? Like we're all naturally, I think, pretty helpful. I know several of you on here. We always want to like help and make a difference. Like we're the change makers, but we always have, or I have that first thought, like, why did it happen that way? Yeah, why did you have white carpet? Now, like, I think about all the things that could have gone differently, and working to like let that go and genuinely live in that helpful place. It's only toxic to me with those thoughts. The white carpet, they love their white carpet, like let them live their best lives and suffer the consequences of having white carpet.
So in this chapter, she goes a little bit deeper into like what are the highest shame levels that we see are actually in violent criminals that are incarcerated. And so we start kind of looking into like, does shame correlate with like having like a moral compass, right? And so she starts to explain to us that shame is not a good way like to change behavior. So if you really do want to change, like let's say you're helping either, whether it's a coworker, an employee, or a child, if you really want to help them, like shaming them is not like the way that you're gonna get through to them. So you're actually hurting them more, and you're putting them like somewhere where they're actually, you're going to make them shield and carry that armor, and you're eventually going to break them. So we cannot, like as humanity, like claim to love our kids, but shame them. And this is not just our kids, like this is our coworkers, this is our employees, like this is the people that are around us, like people at the grocery store. Like you can't like shame people and claim to like love humanity. Like you can't, like, because it correlates with like putting them down, and as you put somebody in society down, like that triggers, because that goes back, like where do they take it, right? So you don't want them, like shaming leads people like to being judgmental people. So if you shame a child, or like if somebody grows up and like they're judgmental, I used to have a joke, because I would get I get invited every year to the Bel Air fashion show, and when it's time to do the judging, I always say I love to judge. And then I was like, oh my gosh, like that, what a hot mess, right? Because now I'm realizing that this judgmental people were raised by people who shamed them a lot. And so now I realize that in my childhood, I was raised with a lot of blame. It's a Mexican cultural thing. It's not that my parents didn't love me or anything like that. It's just, it's a cultural thing, and we shame kids, and we do it a lot, and we don't stop and think about how much it's affecting them. But now I realize that that was awful, and that was like an awful thing to say, and I don't think I ever want to say that again. But it just led me to like a great discovery within myself. And it almost, this, like there was a lot of times that almost brought me to tears within the book, because of my reflection on it from childhood. Did anybody else experience this? Because I can't be the only one who wanted to cry.
Well, I know there's so much to talk about. I'm already skipping to the empathy part of it. Combined with this together, it's understanding someone, understanding that it's real. My mother was mentally ill when I was raised, and I had empathy towards her to understand and believe everything that she was saying that was so outlandish to be real, and to respect what she was saying. And it's when you understand a person that you feel empathy for them versus sympathy, combined with everything that she says in the book. How do we surpass being shamed? By having empathy, because you push shame aside and you try to understand the person, why they are shameful. And that's huge. I mean, that's something we all have to work on. We have to stop, listen, and try to understand. And that's hard. And I love that she makes us learn to be better. That's my 2 cents.
You're right. We do have we do have to do better. And so she talks about this a lot, like that we have to recognize that our actions leave an impact on the world, and we have to, like, at some point be conscious of the things that we're doing and how we're behaving and how we're treating people. It leaves an impact on people's lives and in the world. And so she starts telling you this. She tells us like this story. So this is a story of a little girl, right? And so this is Susie, and Susie's in class, and so she's talking about a shame experience that Susie had, right? And so the teacher notices that there's a paper that has no name, and she's like, "Who's this paper? Who had this paper?" With no name. And then she starts targeting Susie because they start realizing that Susie's the one who didn't put a name on it. And so there was, so she says that this kind of impact, like it teaches them a lot. And so do you think that that child is going to know the difference between like humiliation and that this teacher should have known better? Or do you think that she's going to shrink and armor up and like think I'm not enough, and so she's going to feel like she's not enough, like she's stupid, how could I forget, how could I do this? And so instead of blaming like the action, like, oh, like she starts blaming herself, right? And so this has happened with many kids before, and sometimes it's our own teachers that are not realizing that they're doing this. And so it goes and it talks about this shame story. And she says that there's only one place where shame is acceptable in school, and she said it's medical school because it's so competitive, that when the teacher asks like, whose paper is this, whose paper is this, in most of the classes, like they're gonna feel, you know, it's gonna belittle even the other kids around, and nobody's gonna say anything on Susie. But she says that in a very competitive nature, like in med school, they would be very willing to rat each other out and like point each other out and say who it was. But that's the only place where it's okay. So other than that, you know, we have to understand that like the humiliation was like, okay, I did not deserve that. And the embarrassment is like, I can't believe I did that. And so embarrassing the child causes them shame. So with this shame, you have a story of like, you start telling yourself, I'll be worthy if I put my name on the paper. I'll be worthy when I lose 10 pounds. I'll be worthy when I get promoted. I'll be worthy when. And so when you start putting these things together, you start realizing that these are like your shame triggers. So whatever makes you feel like unworthy, that is your shame. Like those are your shame triggers, and that is actually what you should bring to life. And some of these, they're most of the time they are handed down from family origins. So like, let's say like in like families of, oh my gosh, and I hate to use this analogy, but like, let's say like Indian or Asian families, like where they want them to be really successful, right? Like then when they're not, like they shame them, like they put them down, like they're not as worthy of value, like they're not deserving of like love and affection. And so it depends on what you were brought up with, like from your family origin. So a lot of like these shame triggers, like they're not new, like we've been feeling them and encompassing them since like we were children. Do you have any thoughts on that, Melanie?
Absolutely. Like when she says, like, I will be worthy, it's like the if when, and she talks about how it steals your joy. And for like, I'm a middle child, and I don't know if there's any other middle children, but like we're kind of like the invisible children, like no one sees us. And I have always had this strong, like, my mom is never proud of me. Like there's nothing I can ever do that is enough for her to be proud of me, right? And that's a story, you know? I mean, that's just like shaming that she has cultivated that I have to get over. And it's like, I could do this, I could do this, I could do this. And instead of feeling joy in the journey and embracing the success myself, it's like I hold my breath. What will my mom say? And I can remember this is a great example. I did my first seminar. I was so excited, like it was profitable. Most people, when they do seminars, their first couple are not profitable. And I call my mom and I'm like, what did you think? Because like she watched some of the videos. She's like, did you gain weight? It just looks like you've gained weight. And I'm like, that's all she has to say. And I let that suck all of the joy out of my success. And it was still a few years after that I finally had to get to the point of how my mom verbally tells me she feels does not dictate my worth or my joy. And it's okay to be happy for yourself. And, like find your cheerleaders. I can't wait to call my girlfriends when something good happens. I can't wait for Lorena to call me when she hits her bonuses. Find those people that are going to be sincerely and genuinely happy for you. I think this is like probably one of the most important things that she shares in this book is that when you are going to be vulnerable, when you are going to expose your gremlins, make sure that you do it with the people who are worthy of hearing it. With your marble jar friends, right? Because the last thing you want to do is be vulnerable with someone who's going to betray you, because it just takes you backwards. And I was lucky in the military. I lived in Europe for a long time, and my mom is just so hard on me. And when my mom would come visit, she'd come for a long time, but I would assign my girlfriends mom duty, where they just had to take her out so I could like get that reprieve and like gather. And, I've had to go years without talking to her because of the shame she ignites and how I couldn't control my own emotions or my own expectations. But through this journey, it's like, it really, I moved to a place where it doesn't faze me, or if it does, it's not for very long. So identifying what your triggers are, and then dragging those gremlins out, and then having those friends in your life that you can say, you know what, my mom, when I leave the room, she'll say stuff about me, so don't agree with her. And making sure that they know that it's okay to like shut that person down, whoever that person is in your life. And when it's your mom, you can't really get away from her, but sometimes it'll be a friend or a coworker, and just kind of like, what does Brene say? This isn't productive, I'm leaving. This isn't productive, I'm leaving. And her friend will just go pain, 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 and walk out. We don't have to stay and feel that way. We have free will to walk away. And she obviously has much more skilled at it than I can't imagine walking out of a meeting with my boss and saying, this isn't productive, I'm leaving, reschedule. Although I might, if she ever got me there, but just the tools that she gives you to self-identify what you're feeling. And that I'm to the place where like I have grass in my backyard for the first time in 2 years, and nothing brings me greater joy than at the end of the day, walking through my grass. I have 3 dogs, letting them play and just like enjoying that. It's like so simple, but it just brings me so much joy. And it just is. And so whatever that joy is for you, feel it in the journey, because there's no if and when. I tell you, when I ran marathons, how disappointing it was to cross the finish line, because there's no parade, there's no band, there's no balloons falling from the ceiling. And so then, because of shame and addiction, what am I going to do next? Instead of, let's go have a beer and relax because I did great today.
So she talks about what are your triggers, right? Like, what are your shame triggers? And she talks about hers are sick. So she didn't like to be sick. Like, she was like, I didn't get sick, and she never stopped like to rest. So to her, like, rest was lazy. So she described it as the same, but it really wasn't. And so she talks about here how those were her shame triggers, like what makes you ashamed of yourself. And so she says that there are 4 elements of like shame resilience, and it's knowing, first of all, what shame is and why they're there, right? She says speaking shame, understanding the difference between humiliation and embarrassment. But she said like shame is not fit for consumption. And at this point, I would also like to ask you again to on the chat put what are some feelings or emotions, or what do you feel when you feel ashamed, right? Like when you feel shame, like what are some of the feelings and emotions that you get? So I'll put one right now. Worthless. Yes. You're let's say like you get tight. Yes, you start to question yourself. Like what else? Hold on, let me get the key. Anger. Yes. So you get choked up, your hands start to tingle, you start to feel guilty, you start to, like, let's say you get red, yes, you get depressed, you feel not worthy. And so she starts, these are the same feelings of when you experience trauma. So she relates to shame as trauma. So a lot of us aren't realizing that even though, let's say, our parents didn't hit us, like, let's say, we didn't suffer physical abuse, when you experience shame, that creates trauma, like the same as if you had gone to war, right? So that's one of the things that she goes into. And so on section 3, it talks about empathy and vulnerability. You review the elements of shame resilience. So she didn't understand what empathy was. So she's like, what is empathy? Like, can we get Melanie to speak on that? So go ahead.
Yeah, no. Kind of like, I'm going to tell you, empathy has been like a struggle. When she's talking about the hole. So like your best friend falls in a hole, and do you walk up and lower yourself down in the hole with them and kind of wallow in it and like help them feel their way through it? Or do you stand at the top and go, wow, you're stupid, how did you get down there? And so like empathy, when you can like kind of just feel with them, sympathy is when you feel sad for them, like, well, that was really stupid, why did you do that? Empathy is when it's like, it's okay, and you can relate, even though maybe you haven't like fell in that exact same hole. You can be there for them. And she talks about like, and I can relate to this, I had a really good friend who lost her daughter. And it takes a lot of empathy to be able to sit with someone who suffered great loss. And she tells a story about wanting to drive by slow and just have her kids throw the casserole at the porch, or send flowers or send a card, because it's hard, right? We want to be there, but we don't know how to be there. It's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be painful for us, because really our only thing that we can do is just sit with that person. And when you can be there for somebody when they are going through some of the worst things in their life, and have that empathy and allow yourself to be uncomfortable, but just show up. And she talks about that so much. You just have to show up. And it's a great thing. And I'm very blessed with social workers in my life as really good friends, and they've taught me that. When you think about, and it seems to be when someone loses a child, this happens more than when they lose parents, and maybe when they lose a spouse too. But it's so painful for us to think about it happening to us. And it's so painful and uncomfortable to be around them, because what are you going to say? Well, I'll share with you what my friend said. Please don't let her memory die. I love it when you talk about Kim, because that means that she's still alive. There's never, ever, ever going to be a day in my life when I don't remember that I lost my child and who she was. But when people avoid me and they don't talk to me about her, it's like she's dying all over again. And so we try and protect ourselves from feeling that pain or that discomfort at the expense of someone who's already in pain who needs empathy. And, it's like when you can just be there and just sit, and maybe like they're not even in the same room, but they know that you're there. It is so powerful and so comforting to them and so uncomfortable and so painful for you. But you just have to be able to move into that space. And, it's like, that's just the best example that I can give you. And it's hard. It's so hard.
So here she talks about, she says, okay, so what is empathy, right? And so she starts the way that we correlate like shame and empathy is that if they were like, if this was a science class and we were going to put shame in a petri dish, right? Shame alone, like it would multiply, it would grow more shame, right? But if you put shame with empathy, like shame cannot grow, like empathy overcomes shame. And so then you have empathy takes away shame. So it's kind of like it's like the antibacterial of the germs, right? And so that's how it shows it. And it talks about how um, uh, em- shame with empathy, like it cannot thrive. Like, and so it goes on to talk about us, like women in the beauty industry. And she says that if every woman, for us, so okay, so I'm going to talk about the female shame and then the male shame. And these are generational shames that we probably don't think about, but this is what we were born with, right? So for women, it's like do everything and look great while you're doing it and do it perfectly, right? And so she actually says that there's a study that says that the beauty industry, it thrives on shame. But if every woman alone in the United States and Canada stopped buying beauty products for 3 days, it would actually cause an economic shift compared to what happened like in the 9/11. And so the shame for men is one. And if you read the book, if you have not read the book, can you try to guess what the shame for men is? Because there's only one shame for men. And this, if you read the book, don't answer. This is for the ones that have not read the book. If you have not read the book, please tell me what you would think that the shame for men is. Did everybody read the book?
I would say
Should I? Oh, no, Nate, you are negative. It talks about don't be weak. So for men, that's their shame. Like men, it's like don't be weak, right? And we always tell boys or anything like, man up, be strong, like don't show emotion, right? And so when we're telling men don't show emotion, they're suppressing all the emotions. And this is not just for women, but it talks about how Botox is actually killing empathy and emotions for a lot of people, and we stop thinking about why, right? But a lot of the times when we hear somebody talk, when we hear somebody express themselves, like we can feel like their happiness, we can feel their sadness, like we can see a lot of like their emotion on their face, right? And so I carry my emotion on my face. But what do you think is going to happen like if I had Botox and there was no emotion on my face? And there's women that are really going hard on this like fillers and Botox and lips and all that. And so it's saying it's killing our empathy because you really don't know how they're feeling. So this goes back once again like to the beauty industry. It's making us feel like we're not enough, like I do need to get this, like I need to get this service, but that's also blocking us from feeling feelings. Like there's no expression there. And so a lot of the times, like if you see somebody that can't express emotion because they have a lot of work done, right? Like they can't move their face. You can't tell if they're sad, but if there was somebody that has not had any work done and they're sad, like you can still kind of see it in their eyes even when they're hiding it. Of course, if I'm like like this, then you're gonna know I'm sad. But if I'm trying to play it off, you know, if I didn't have so much of that, then you would be able to see it. So it is kind of what Melanie touched base on, which is like sitting in the dark with others, and feeling with them. Empathy is feeling with them. So that's an antidote to shame. But sympathy is an amplifier. And sympathy, the difference is you're feeling for them. Like, I feel, you know, I feel your sadness with you, or I feel sad for you. Like, it's so terrible. So we're not actually helping them, but we need to teach people that vulnerability, it's not a weakness. It's allowing ourselves to be seen. And so one of I'm gonna say this because there's, I think, three of them in here, but a lot of what you hear is like, I don't do vulnerability, I'm a lawyer. Like, I don't do vulnerability, I'm a guy. Like, you know, and the list goes on. Like, I don't feel emotions, like, I'm not going to do this. But we need to understand that we do vulnerability every day, and there's things that we go with the flow without us being able to control them. And one is love. Like, we have no control of love, right? Like, whoever you love, and that's like your kids, or your partner. Like, when you love them, you have no control over how much they're gonna love you back. And this, like, is in friendship and everything, right? And so we have no control. Like, we give love without, you know, we're vulnerable, like when we live with love. And you can't do vulnerability alone. You have to understand that being imperfect is what makes people love us. So, you know, they're not in love, you don't love me because I'm perfect and I do everything right. Like, you love me because despite the fact that I'm not perfect, I still show up. Like, I still, you know, continue doing this, that I still continue doing that. And so we need to try to adapt to like a little bit more of that. And here we go on to section 4, where she talks about the car accident story that Lorena is, sorry, about the date night story that she talks about. But for those of you that have not read, and actually I'm gonna go ahead and ask everybody, because she starts this chapter with a story about, let's go with, so there's a family of 5 in the car, you know, and they're singing Christmas carols, and everybody's like so happy, and they're like singing at the top of their lungs, and you can, everybody in the car is just feeling like so happy. And what is the next thing? Like, so now I've taken you on like the beginning, right? So I'm telling you like exactly how the story starts. Like, you're seeing this. What's next? Like, what is next? What happens next? Like, in your opinion, what's next in the story? It's Christmas carols, so they're just singing, let's say it's Jingle Bells, and they're singing Jingle Bells like as a family at the top of their lungs, and they're laughing and they're having like a wonderful time. Like, what are some of the options of what happens next, like in your mind? What
For
can
me,
go ahead.
it was death. I was like, they're gonna die. They're gonna get run over by a semi, which is totally how I've either died or I'm gonna die. So that's always what I go to. Like, they're gonna be crushed, like tragically. Somebody's gonna be ejected. And it goes back to what we were talking. We fill our heads with like media consumption, but it's also that thief of joy, is that joy cannot be had without tragedy at the end of it, right? And I'm like, death, that's it. And it's totally ingrained in me. Same thing when I like kiss my kid goodnight. Like, I have to just make sure that we're always saying I love you, and I don't ever like kiss her. Like, I'm never in a hurry not to leave, because I 100% think this could always be the last time. Always. You know, we're not just like happy enough or good enough or like joyful enough or safe enough, because tragedy is just like around the corner. It's my gremlin.
And that's what, once again, what we're sold in the media. Like we said earlier, you know, the CSI, the Law and Order, like that's what they expect us, because that's kind of what they show. And then we start to project this, and this is Lorena's favorite story. Because we start to project this, like we're having so much fun, and then we're like, oh my God, like, then that gremlin shows up of like, I can't enjoy this, like something is going to happen here, right? And so it's it's sad, but it's very true. It does happen, and it happens to all of us. And so she goes into her date night story, and she's had a great date, and she waits for the babies to find out if like the babysitter's home, so that to make sure that the babysitter put the babies to sleep. And as her husband's like kissing her, like she's like, oh my God, what if somebody jumped out of the bushes and like just you know, um, like killed us or something. And so she says this story, and it's true. We're training ourselves to be sucker punch. Like we're training ourselves like for tragedy, for us to not be happy. Like we're not allowing us to have like our happy story, because in the end, like we're just like we're wearing that armor of protection. That
And
very
then
heavy
she, yeah, and she also explains too that you are preparing yourself because it's going to happen. And when it happens, I'm going to have played this scenario so many times that you can't get me. Like, you can't break me. You can't bring me down. I am ready for this tragedy because I've played it out in my head so many times. But then, of course, she goes on to explain you can never prepare yourself. That she's talked to hundreds and hundreds of people who it's really happened to. And you cannot prepare yourself for these kinds of tragedies. So just allow yourself to feel joy, that it's okay, that you're worthy of it. And guilty like everyone else. Like the first time I heard it, like I catastrophized it, like they're going to be in an accident. But then, like when Michelle's saying it, because I know the story and I know the moral of the story, it's like, to me, everyone stops singing because they go into this place where, like all those beautiful houses up on Rim Road where everything's decorated and the kids are just like, I want to go get my picture taken there. And it's changing that story. And I have 3 dogs, so I'm sorry, they're always all over me. It's changing that story in your head that, you know what, I am allowed to have a happy ending. And I love how Michelle was sharing about, I think like you have your children, you love them because that's the way nature intended it. But I'm telling you, my boyfriend, I love him so much and I have no idea why, but it's for all those reasons. And I just laugh at myself because I was so guarded, so much armor for so long that I never would allow it. And now it's like we're kind of mismatched, but in a perfect way. And he's just a great guy, and I don't know why he puts up with me, but I'm grateful he does. And it's like I can't help but love him. I just can't. And it's awesome. He's so lucky.
He is so lucky because experiencing love is one of the greatest joys in life. And she does say that. And so here she starts to go into like the nicer subjects. So now we're done addressing like the hard subjects like shame and vulnerability. And she tells us that in order to experience joy in life, we have to be more wholesome people. And so the people that lean into joy, it's because they practice gratitude. So joyful people practice gratitude. It's not that they don't feel that they don't practice, that they're not vulnerable. It's not that they're strong. It's not that they haven't experienced trauma. It's just that they practice gratitude. And so she says that anytime that you feel like you're upset or you have a negative thought in your head, to practice gratitude, to instead think of something good, like block that image and think of something that you're grateful for, something that makes you happy, because that's where it starts changing. Like you have to change your mindset. Remember, we are what we think. So we're not going to be able to take this armor off unless we put on the light and fluffy and feathery out armor that doesn't fit. Like we need to put on wings. And so it's when you practice gratitude. So if you want more joy in your life, you have to practice gratitude, especially in the moments of vulnerability.
I will tell you that I have a great journey with gratitude. I was challenged by a coach that I had at the time to, for 30 days, write down everything that you receive that you didn't do something for. So like not your paycheck because you went to work for it, but like if you find a penny on the ground, if someone brings you Starbucks, and so we had like a private Facebook group that we were all journaling and keeping this in. But it was amazing to me. Like at first, it's like you're looking around like there ain't nothing that happened today that I'm grateful for, right? I woke up. How lame is that, right? But then it was like, you know what? I didn't find a penny. I found a quarter. And like through this journey, the funniest stuff happened because your energy shifts. And I was at the Angry Owl in El Paso, and this guy just walked up to our table and he's like, hey, I have these tickets to the Chihuahuas game. Do you want them? And I was like, yes, because I have to put it in my gratitude journal. And they were like right in the front row, right in the dugout. And then like the people next to us like bought us a beer and a hot dog. And I'm just like, this is so incredible. But I really believe that you vibrate at a different level. And when you can like write down one thing that you're grateful for every day, or tell somebody that you're grateful for them in a sincere way every day, that it will change how you look at the world because you will find what you're looking for. So if I'm looking for what I'm grateful for, I'm going to start finding it, and I'm going to start finding it in abundance. And if I'm looking for everything that's making me miserable, I'm going to find it, and I'm going to find it in abundance. So like if this is something you're struggling with, just start small. I challenge you. Do the 30-day challenge. Just get a piece of paper and just write one thing a day that you're grateful for, and just watch how it like multiplies and escalates, and just like crazy, amazing stuff happens to us every day. We're just not paying attention.
I'd really second that for anybody who has children. The first time I ever saw Brene, gosh, it was like 8-9 years ago, and my daughter was like 3. And so every day we started naming 5 things she was grateful for. You know, some days it was her toy, it was her peanut butter and jelly sandwich. But as she got older, it started to change. And she was like, I'm grateful that we got a new job, or I'm grateful that we're getting healthy. And it starts to shift like our future. I think that's probably one of the most impactful things from this book, is that while we can recognize that the older we've gotten, some of our experiences were because of adults, we have to like decide in this moment that we're impacting our cohorts, our contemporaries, but also those who are coming after us, and how are we impacting their lives through the lessons that we're learning, especially from this book. And that changing the shift from the attitude of gratitude, well, I'm just grateful. You know, she shared this story about having gone through Hurricane Ike, and her therapist and friend called her and was like, how are you? She's like, well, I'm so grateful. We have a generator and we have water, and you know, we didn't lose our home like those in the Bay or in Galveston. And she's like, okay, bullshit. How do you really feel? And she was like, there's mosquitoes like everywhere. I just want to take a shower. We haven't had running water. And she was like, okay, you can be grateful for all of those things. And I give you permission. You have to have permission to let it all out. But that's where the difference in the mindset of gratitude and the actual practice of gratitude, because she wouldn't actually be able to see all of the things that she was really blessed with after that tragic hurricane on the coast, had she not had that daily practice of what am I grateful for? Because in those dark, horrible, mosquito infested, no water, no shower, everybody is smelly and no socks, it's hard to find what you're grateful for. You can easily slip into those numbing effects. You can slip into shame. You can do all of the things that we previously talked about, but because she has that daily practice, she was able to say, okay, this is where we're at and this is how we're going to get better.
That is great. I always love the parenting stories because they're so relatable. We've all either had parents, no parents, or been parents, right? So I like that. I like that you let her practice gratitude. So going on to the next chapter, we're going to talk about what do we need to let go of to practice wholeheartedness. And so the first thing she says is cultivating authenticity. And what is this? This is letting go of what people think that we need to be and showing up as how we are. And this is a practice that you choose every day. And it's letting go of what we think we're supposed to be and being who we are. Set boundaries. And it's hard to talk about authenticity. And so here she relates authenticity like to when you say like, oh, rich people don't need to ask for the price, right? That's what we think. Rich people know the damn price. Like they know exactly how much it is. Rich people know the price because that's how they keep their money. And so that's how we need to reach out to authenticity. Like we need to reach out to authenticity. Like we need to talk about it. We need to know about it. We need to practice it so that we know that we are being authentic. Does anybody have anything to say about authenticity? So she says it's cultivating authenticity and letting go of perfectionism. Does anybody struggle with perfectionism? Please don't let me say I'm the only one.
I know, no, like I think this relates totally to my story about my mom. It's like what do you need to let go of? Les Brown, a motivational speaker, he says you need to let go or it'll drag you down. And that's what happened is when I finally let go of my identity being tied to how my mom viewed what I was doing, that's when I could really start being authentic and like stop worrying about it, because the love and the joy is in our imperfections, about what makes us unique and about what makes us who we are. And again, we put on armor, we put on masks, and the best times I have are when I'm with my friends and we're just being us and we're laughing too loud and we're talking too much and we're singing and we can just be. And it's like the more you could step into that and just be who you are all the time and not have on armor and not have on masks and share your pain and share your story, the more joy you will find. I have 3 dogs and 2 cats, and so many people go like, you're not going to have any more, are you? Well, when I had one child, they were like, you only have one kid, doesn't matter what you're doing, if it brings you joy, it's enough. And it's like, I don't judge people who don't have pets. I don't judge people who have more pets than me. 5 is right for me right now. I don't know. Maybe I'll go to 6. Maybe when one of them passes away, I won't get another one. I don't really know. But for me right now, I cannot imagine my life without any of them. They're incredible. They're amazing. And I just kind of laugh when people like cast their judgment on how many pets. I feed them. I take care of them, and that should be good enough for anyone. So kind of just owning it, if you're doing you and it brings you joy, just be authentic. And other people's judgment, you just let it go, and let it go.
I thought it was really interesting how she talked about the commercialization of authenticity, and that like when corporate America or like your PR firms or your marketing houses get a hold of like this word, it actually kind of, or any word, right? It gets shifted from what its original intention is. And that really, showing up as you are without regard for how others make you feel. And that story she told about her daughter left for school, and I'm really personal or sensitive to hair. I'm in the hair business. I work with creatives. Like that's what I do. I'm hair for the last 15 years. So it's a lot when a child is shamed by others for how they wear their hair, and they come home and they change it. And so Brene tells her, well, did you love your hair? Did it make you happy? Did it bring you joy? Then why are you letting what others think impact how you show up? And that's authenticity. That's showing up how I am because I love it. And when we change it, that's what's breaking our authenticity. My daughter shaved half her head 2 years ago. And before we let her do that, we had a really strong conversation. So what are you going to say when somebody says that you look like a boy, or you have hair like a boy, or why did you do that? She's like, that I don't care because I love it. And we're like, cool. We didn't coach you. We didn't tell you to say that. That's what you feel. You can shave your head. And that innate, or I guess shame is also learned, but that younger generation having that shame tactic built into them is what breaks down authentic people, and is like this huge disservice to us now and as adults. Like when she was upset that her Christmas decorations hadn't come down because her Valentine's decoration, well, what are people going to think? Who cares? right? Do you love it? Do it. And commercial America isn't sharing that that's what authentic is. Authentic is the great lighting, the perfect color scheme, the best hair. Yes, less crow feet. That's not authentic. And I'm in beauty, so I definitely acknowledge that. But really working to not to like give zero fucks what people think, sorry. But really we can like live that, we'll get to our most authentic self. And I love that she shared that so well in her stories.
So I actually have a small story to tell you guys where I believe I practiced authenticity without knowing it. And recently for my boutique, I ordered some fairy dresses and I love them and they're so fancy, right? And so I'm like, where am I going to wear this to? I don't know. Well, guess what? I've already worn it to several places where maybe it wasn't required that we dress that much, but I put a jean jacket to dress it down. So I was like, it's okay. Like, I felt like I was like such a child, like as a child when you wear like your favorite costume or like your favorite dress without caring what anybody thinks. I wore the dress and I was like, I don't care. Like, it makes me happy. Like, look at it. Like, it just like, I can pick it up all the way over here. And like, it's like, it's a beautiful dress. I've worn it like to the bar. It was not a place. The bar is definitely like a very casual place where nobody would wear a fairy dress, guys. But I love the dress. I love wearing it and I love showing up in it and it makes me happy. And I really don't care what anybody thinks if I'm overdressed. And I completely am. I really do look like a fairy, but it's okay. I love it. It makes me so, so happy. And so I guess I can say that, and we have to practice more of that every day, like of the things that make us happy, of the things that make us feel good. Like for me, it was a dress, but for some of us, it's something else. Like it's okay. Like we don't have to feel like it's perfect. Like we don't have to, I don't have to be at a high-end party to wear my dress. And I don't even think I want to go to a high-end party, but just where I go is enough. If I'm at the grocery store, if I'm I did go to the grocery store in my fairy dress, actually. So, I'm such a kid. But is there anybody else that has practiced authenticity and made them feel like a kid again, Melanie?
I was gonna say, I'm the opposite. I was always dressed perfect hair, perfect makeup, perfect business suit, even when it's like casual nothing. And I showed up this weekend to go out to eat with my friends in my sweats, and it was awesome. And we had a great time. And I said, now listen, if they don't let us in because the way that I'm dressed, I apologize, and we will go home and have pizza. But we're gonna at least try and get in. And they didn't say anything. I was so comfortable. Let me tell you, I was loving it. And like 2 years ago, no, it wouldn't have happened ever. Nope. I love sweatpants.
We love what we love, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I love a fairy dress. You love sweatpants. I mean, I love a fairy dress with Converse. That was
Yeah.
the fairy dress. So definitely. Lorena?
I wasn't embarrassed to be with her sweatpants.
Thank you.
I was there.
And she was dressed beautifully, let me tell you. She was $1 million.
Christopher?
I wear Mickey Mouse ties to high-end parties. So
I love it.
He does. He has a Pluto. He loves Disney, and I love that he's so proud of it too. Like that's like the kid in us. Like me wearing a fairy dress. Like we love what we love, and being proud of it is awesome. He has a Pluto cover for his golf clubs, and it's really awesome. You give me the correct terms, Chris.
yes, yeah, that you're right. It's a head cover for the golf clubs, but yeah, I mean,
For your driver specifically, right?
right. And so
Okay.
yeah, no, it's definitely and I've always been like that. I'm always the one that buys crazy hats or you know, I don't think I have necessarily a problem with authenticity. I think people have I think social media has a lot to do with people wanting to deflect their authenticity and pretend to be somebody they're not. But I think yeah, I mean obviously if you're comfortable enough to, I think authenticity is what people think you're making a fool out of yourself, but in reality, it's just that they're afraid to be who they are.
Okay, I just realized the time, so I'm gonna try to kind of go real quick through the rest of the things that she talks about, what we need to practice wholeheartedness, right? And so she says we need to practice self-compassion by letting go of perfectionism, because we do actually practice perfectionism to keep ourselves safe. And so 3 components of self-compassion, because remember, we have to start with ourselves. Like, I can't have, as much as I want to say that I have compassion for others, but not myself, like I don't really have compassion until I'm practicing it with myself, because you have to practice it with yourself first. So it says it's self-kindness, it's mindfulness, and it's being aware of like humanity. So once again, the imprint that you're leaving in everything. Cultivating a resilient spirit. What's your bounce back factor? Like, so obviously right here she talks about, she gives like a story about her being an introvert, and us and extroverts are very well known, and this obviously happened before we knew that this was not okay. But for those of you, can I get a in the chat, can you tell me if you're an introvert or an extrovert, before I actually continue with this? And so what's the introvert? Like, the introvert in me like needs time to charge. I'm okay with like being here like in front of everyone, but if we were like at a cocktail party, like it really drains me. Like, I just need time alone to kind of re-energize, right? And so she said that it for like the people that are extroverts usually tend to shame introverts, like, oh, get out, like, come on, like, start talking. They push us. And so in some of the times, they it's shame like that extroverts are causing like for introverts. And so we need to find ourselves like in that situation of being aware of each other. Like, extroverts have nothing wrong with them, like they just get energy from being around other people, whereas to introverts are drained by that energy. So it's kind of like whichever one you find yourself in. So it's like finding perspective and purpose. Like, wholehearted people are spiritual. This does not mean that they're religious, and this does not mean that they are church going. They cultivate gratitude and joy. So they have a gratitude attitude and they practice it. Like, okay, so like you can have a gratitude attitude, and we've seen it before. If anybody follows social media, this is like a perfect example. There was a guy that used to do dating stuff, and then it just came out that he was cheating on his wife the whole time. So even though that's what he was preaching, and he was great at preaching it, he wasn't practicing it. And so it can be the same thing, like when we have that gratitude attitude, like we talk about it and we want to, but we want to be about it. Like, don't just talk about it, be about it. So it says, do you practice it? Because once you practice it, it transforms you. So it says, cultivating intuition and trusting faith. Intuition is not a single way of knowing. We can practice as much intuition as we want, but in reality, like Melanie and Jessica have said earlier, it does not mean that we are prepared for trauma. So as like, you can trust your gut, but you can never like be prepared for trauma. And so this one is my favorite one, because you'll find out why. But so it talks about some of the, so the hold on, I'm sorry. So how do we do this? Like, we also have to cultivate creativity to let go of perfection. So you have to have something that makes you creative, something that makes you work with your hands, whether you're a mechanic, whether you knit, whether you do music, whether you're in a band, whether you paint, anything that you do with your hands. Cultivating creativity, like, actually is one of the practices that people were wholesome, they experience. And so she was like, I don't do that. Like, she was very adamant that she doesn't practice art. She was like, you go do your ART while I'm gonna go do my JOB and do something serious. And so she even like shamed, like this girl shamed the people who were artsy and creative. Jessica?
This was a really powerful moment for me in the book. So I listened to this a long time ago, and I think I get more from it every time I do, and it's been a few years, but this one really hit home because of the pandemic. And again, because I work with creatives in the hairdressing primarily community. And when the pandemic started, we were all shut down. Our salons were closed, our spas were closed. And I really believe we're artists. And I'm not a cosmetologist. Crystal, who's joining us, is, and several of my friends are. And so essentially, yes, to protect us, we shut down our salons. And we had this whole campaign of what's essential and what's not essential. And when you tell an artist, when you tell an innately creative person that what you do is not essential, what you have done, because what truly lives inside you has to like manifest itself outside of you, that's not worthy. It showed up in depression, in anger, in sadness, in drug use, and all of those things that we talked at the beginning of for numbing in our creative community. That took a lot of like resiliency. And then you saw these creative people who, color and cut hair, start sculpting, start learning pottery, start painting, because all of those creative emotions that innately live inside of them needed to get out. And I hadn't remembered or thought about that, but we just witnessed a whole world go through that. And some of us who didn't ever pick up a paintbrush or have art turned to art to help deal with those feelings that were coming out. So when somebody tells you that's the worst horse I've ever seen, we may have suppressed the next Monet or the next Rembrandt or the next Picasso, very common, popular, amazing artists, because at one point we used shame to stop them. As it is with our community, a lot of salons haven't reopened for one of two reasons. One, we just couldn't afford it. We couldn't make it happen. And two, they lost that. They turned to the numbing. They turned to, I'm not good enough. Because of that art shame that kind of happened at the beginning of the pandemic, not for any blaming of anybody. It's just what happened to our creative community. And it kind of rocked my world having to listen to that again through this book. That was probably the biggest. I mean, there was really epic and big moments, but for my community, that was the most tragic thing that I had to hear going through that book. And how do we bring them back? It's like my new mission.
She does, and I'm glad that that's your mission, because she does tell us how important it is for us to have something creative. Now, when I worked with the Alzheimer's Association, they do tell you that, like, the people who read, the people who do something creative, whether it's like a puzzle, painting, anything like that, it prevents you from getting Alzheimer's. So the brain is like a muscle, and obviously we have to use it. But she says this, if we don't use this creativity, it turns into things that we don't like. Aside from Alzheimer's, right? It turns into shame, it turns into judgment, it turns into rage, and it turns into grief. Once again, unused creativity turns into shame, judgment, rage, and grief. So make sure that we are keeping ourselves busy with something creative, because that's important, that we don't have shame, judgment, rage, or grief in our plate. Like, you don't want to have any of that. Tune into something creative, get something, find something. It's essential. Like, it is necessary for us, and it could be something very detrimental if we hide our creative side. Melanie, do you have anything to add on that? It's so important.
Yeah, everything that everybody said is so true. And, it's when you're a perfectionist, Michelle, and when you are judged by so many for everything that you do, it's so hard to put yourself out there. And I tell you, those I painted that classes are the best thing ever. I love painting. I have a whole laundry room full of my paintings that, you know, like them or don't like them, I love them. And it brings me so much joy. And, you know, some of us were sharing in the chat how much we love Lorena's art, and exactly what Jessica said. It was uncovered during the pandemic. I had just a few friends over and we kind of did a YouTube. I painted that because you couldn't do things in person. She didn't even really want to come, I'm going to tell you, but she's my BFF, so she didn't have a choice. And the woman paints beautifully. I mean, absolutely.
She has a gallery at Hippie Girl, guys.
I know. I'm going to walk into my room and just show you to the point where it has changed her life. It's something she never would have done.
Right.
It's a talent she didn't know she had. Be prepared to be wowed. Let me build the
And now
anticipation.
she actually has to write a bio for her gallery at Hippie Girl, and she is procrastinating on it, but we're gonna get it very soon, right, Lorena?
Right.
Well, I got 2 of them as gifts, and I'm gonna show them to you here in just a second.
No.
Let me figure out how to work my phone first. You know, I've locked myself out trying to figure this out. Can I turn my camera around? Oh, here we go. So was this the first one you did, Lorena?
Yes.
Oh.
And then this is the one she painted for me for Christmas. And this is someone who before the pandemic would have swore to you she couldn't paint.
She doesn't
But
do
when you allow yourself to be creative and you just don't judge it and you just try, you will be amazed at what you're good at.
Okay,
So-
so it goes on to, we do need, like we said, creativity, like you're right, to make something that never existed is extremely, incredibly vulnerable. So we want to make sure that we're practicing this. We're afraid to contribute sometimes into our creative side because shame was used to hold us down, kind of like Jessica said, like a teacher was like, no, don't be an artist. Like, no, don't do this. And how many times have we heard like artists or painters or even writers say that they had a teacher who told them to go another route, you know?
Right.
Keep in what you're doing. So it goes back into like, now we're like in the last session and it goes into the next guidepost, which is 7 through 10, guys. So we're almost done. And it talks about letting go of exhaustion as a status symbol. Wholehearted people don't use exhaustion as a status symbol, and we do. And so she talks about this story, how she was in this elevator with some lawyers, and it was 3 lawyers. And this is how the story went. One guy asked the other one, like, how late did you work last night? And then the guy was like 7 p.m. And then the other guy's like 8 p.m. And then they asked the third guy, how long were you working? And he's like, I haven't stopped working. And then he's the winner. Like he gets the high five, like, oh my God. And so we need to stop doing this. Like we need to cultivate play and rest into our lives. And she was actually seeing fully. She had to come to terms with what play was because she stopped. She didn't understand. Like she thought it was like a great discovery that she discovered that play makes you happy. And so she's like, I really did. She's like, I called everybody and like I told them, I was like, I'm changing the world, because she thought she had just discovered this. And so it is like we do need to play. Like we need to play and rest. And we need to let go as exhaustion as a status symbol.
And like I just experienced that in my story I told you earlier. But one thing I do, and so that's why I'm like, okay, Michelle, yes, we got to wrap it up, is I get 8 hours of sleep a night, and I consider that a gift. And Lorena does too, so that's why she's laughing. And you know, it's like I think I turned 50 and I was like, I'm not apologizing. They'll call me after 9 o'clock. I'm asleep. You know, and my boyfriend goes to work an hour earlier than me when he's lucky, which is about once every 3 weeks. I'll get up and make him coffee because I can still sleep for another hour. I need my 8 hours because I have to use my brain all day long. And so I need my 8 hours. But yeah, permission to have fun and have joy and like leave work for lunch. That's like such a treat where I work. And it's like, you know what? I work hard. I deserve it. And I love it. So Lorena came and picked me up for lunch the other day. And in New Mexico, everything was still locked down. So we had to go through the drive through at Cane's. But, you know, it was just so delightful. And so do that a lot. Give yourself permission. Give yourself permission to be happy, to find joy, to like kind of taste that forbidden fruit. Like, really, you took a lunch hour and you left? Yep, I sure did. And it was awesome. And I had a great time.
It was, and so once again, letting go of exhaustion, cultivating play and rest. So we do need to rest, we do need to play. And then she talks about the paradox of fast, fun, and easy. So there's the mythology behind rest, and we only put value on these things that are fast, fun, and easy. But things that are valuable, things that bring us joy and happiness are actually hard, and they take time and thought. So racing to like finish things, it comes from like that feeling once again of scarcity, like a scarcity. Nothing is running out, guys. Like we think it's running out, but nothing is running out. Like we have so much, and we need to let go of this fast, fun, and easy. Like we need to stop bragging about exhaustion. We need to stop feeling that we're not being enough. And being busy, it does not mean that you're important. We are exhausted, we are resentful, we are tired, and we are thinking about what we are not doing because we are not practicing the whole play and rest. So we need to cultivate calm and stillness and letting go of anxiety as a lifestyle, because being calm is actually a superpower. Okay, so she once again goes into being calm as a practice. And so she talks about people who calm like they breathe. And she says, and they breathe like real breath, like whole breath in, like it let it go, like 5 seconds in, 10 seconds out. And so that is how you practice, like make sure that that calm people like do practice breathing. They cultivate meaningful work, laughter, and being cool. It's like it's not an emotional it's an emotional straight jacket. Melanie, do you have something to put in on this last chapter, or Jessica?
Yeah, no,
I just want to finish.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, I
that's
want to
it.
finish so I can go to bed. I'm trying to rest. But it's funny because I have a coworker who I adore. He's 23. And you have to think about back to your younger self before we were so evolved and self-aware. And every day he comes in and tells me how exhausted he is. And because he did this or he did that or whatever. He's young. And it's a badge of honor. And I've been there. I mean, I can remember there was a time not that long ago, maybe like 5 or 6 years ago. They're like, do you ever sleep? Like you're up late at night and you're up early in the morning. And again, it was like being praised for it, where I would push myself beyond what I wanted to do because of the perceived accolades for being able to go, go, go. Are you kidding? Now I'm just like, no, because you know what? It shortens your lifespan. And it goes back to your health, your mental health, the longevity, actually how you show up. Like I'm not tired in the morning. I show up and I am good to go, ready to start my day. And this poor kid, it takes him till about 10 o'clock to get twisted back around where he's even semi-awake. Guilty, been there, done that. But nothing is better than waking up refreshed and able to face the day, and just how much more productive, how much happier you could be, how much more useful to other people you could be. And they're like, how do you go to sleep so easy? I'm like, I don't know, maybe my head's empty, but I have no guilt for sleep. So get some rest, but play's hard. And So this Easter, it's all grown-ups with us, but we are throwing a little kid's Easter party, and I have not been so excited for something in I don't know how long. I can't wait. I can't wait. I can't wait to hide eggs, find eggs, and eat chocolate and just laugh. And a few years ago, I would have never, I'd been like, I am not doing that. I would have wanted to, but I wouldn't have allowed myself. So find your joy.
Jessica, could I get your last words on that?
I think just overall in this book, if we can really stick to those guideposts and find out which ones that you need to work on and identify, I loved her idea of her Venn diagram to figure out what works for her family for play. Because then everybody is working towards the same goal of living their most wholehearted, fulfilled self. And we don't seem to pull each other in all these different directions. We recently learned as a family, we want to be on the beach. That's our idea of like this vacation. And the Texas coast is beautiful. My daughter even asked me this morning, this summer, can we go to South Padre? Because I want to put my toes in the sand and walk in the water. And yeah, because that's all of our versions of play. And we don't get us just how Melanie said for like these badges of honor. We're all at different stages of our lives. And if we can learn that we don't get gold stars and what we're getting gold stars for sometimes don't matter, block out the time in your schedule for what you need, for your rejuvenation, for your rest, for your mental awareness, and don't sacrifice it. Don't give it up for somebody. Don't sell your life short because of the demands of somebody else. And I am 100% guilty of saying yes to things I probably shouldn't have. I am guilty of choosing resentment over discomfort, which she talks about a lot. And if I could have just figured out how to be a little discomforting in the moment and said, no, think of me next time, I wouldn't have been resentful. I may not have lashed out to people who I really loved because I had nothing to do with them, but I was angry. So we can learn to take her practices into our daily life, not right away, but over a long term, you really will end up just this more fulfilled person for yourself and for those around you. And thank you so much, Michelle, for bringing us this opportunity and this dialogue together of like-minded people who are on the same journey, because it's a lifetime of fulfillment and a lifetime of change and ebb and flow, because we aren't who we are yesterday and we're not who we're meant to be yet. And I think this is a really amazing journey to go on with everybody.
I love this. I love that I created this book club. It's been the best thing to happen to me. I love reading, but I didn't understand the impact that it would have in my life. And so I'm grateful for everybody that has participated in this. For those of you that are part of the book club, we have a new member, Annie Perez, and she's going to be showing us our next book, which is Crush It by Gary, is it Vaynerchuk? Is that how you pronounce his last name? I don't know. I usually go by Gary V. I do listen to his motivational videos, so we're about to start reading his book. Brown has been amazing. Annie, are you here?
Yes, sorry. I'm like moving around and, just, I can't sit still. I'm sorry.
It's okay. Thank you for joining us.
No, thank you guys. This has been really cool. I appreciate the invite and getting to, learn about more of your all style and how to present next month. But I'm super excited. I'm already about to start the book again. I'm hooked. I love Gary Vee. I listen to him every single day. If you guys can consume anything from him, however you like to consume information, he's on YouTube, podcasts, on Instagram, on Facebook. He's everywhere. But I'm pretty excited about it. I hope you guys enjoy the book. He's kind of, raw, if you will. Like, he's not edited. He's just off the cuff. And what's the word? I appreciate it, where it's like, let's just cut through the BS and talk about how to do this, you know? So, but like I said, I'm excited to join you guys, and I hope you guys come with a lot of questions. I'm in marketing in my day job, and I have Annie's Adventures on Facebook and Instagram. So I am here to help any way I can for the El Paso and surrounding community in general, but especially when it comes to marketing, like you guys are going to tell me, you guys are going to have to tell me like, okay, Annie, just shut up. Like, that's enough. We have to go to bed now, you know, because I can't stop. It's so fun for me and I enjoy it. And like I said, thank you.
Thank you guys. The Brene Brown book for me has been life-changing. I don't think I'll stop listening. I actually got the CDs and I popped one in everywhere, like one in my office, one in my car, one in my truck. So I'm just listening everywhere. These are lessons that I want to be reminded of for life. If you didn't get the audiobook, if you want to borrow it, remember we have all the books available at Hippie Grove if you'd like to go listen, or if you'd like to borrow. I can't lend you the Crushing It because I'm going to be reading it for the next 3 weeks. But I'm willing to help you all out if you need help on figuring out how to get the books. I go to I haven't purchased a book for more than $5.99 yet, because most of them are available at secondhand stores, like thrift.com or secondhand book, I think, and they have them for like $2.99, $1.99. So make sure that you're getting these books in however you can read. If you're like a listening person, get them an audiobook. Like we said, these books are extremely life-changing. The fact that you're in this group lets me know that you're wanting to do better for yourself and that you like to read. And this is a wonderful way of us spending our time together. And I'm glad that I was able to turn this into a mini business so that it can help all of us. Like I love helping myself and I love helping people along the way. Like I'm just extending my hand out to those who want to go on to that journey with me. Melanie, thank you so much for helping me present this book.
My
Melanie,
pleasure. It was an honor. Thank you for inviting me.
Jessica, thank you once again for being there as well. Jessica has been my business coach and she's doing amazing. Lorena, if you're still awake, thank you so much, friend, like for helping me with everything. Lorena is my life partner. She's my friend. I love her so much and she's my motivator. So she is that friend that I call. She's in my marble jar. And so she is that friend that I call, that I trust, and that has helped me and put when I need to feel vulnerable or when I feel shame, she is one of those friends. So thank you for being that, because I've learned with this book that friendship is invaluable, that there's no price to that friendship. You are priceless, and you are one of the greatest gifts that the world has given me, which is a good friend. So thank you for that. Thank you for everybody joining me. I hope you guys have a good night. I'm going to go ahead and end the live, and then